Let's see, we're at 18
Do
people.
it.
Should we get going? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, I will get started, and then hopefully if people roll on in, all they're missing are my announcements. So I want to thank everyone for being here. Very exciting for this 3-part webinar series. It's kind of amazing to sit back and reflect that over a year has passed since the last time we were all here together, and what a crazy year that none of us could predict then. But I'm very proud of how we've come together as a community. And speaking narrowly to CYJL, I think it's been a trying year, but we've come through on the other side, and I'm hopeful and optimistic. A reminder for the other sessions that Amy will be leading right after today's seminar webinar. I will send calendar invites for those. Amy has set up the Zooms, and so I will get both of those out there. In terms of strategic planning, hopefully most of you have had a conversation or multiple conversations getting that process underway. I think the timing of this webinar series is great. For starters, with prospecting, I'm really pushing each and every one of you to really outline who you're planning on reaching out to as new prospects. Today's session, Amy will help you determine if someone is ready for that conversation yet, or if they're still in the stage of cultivation, which is also part of our strategic plan. And in the next few sessions after today, she will get into having the legacy conversation, as well as following up, confirming details on a COC, or even through stewardship, asking for an increased gift. I'm very excited to learn from Amy's wisdom, and I think they're going to be great sessions. Outside of that, I want to make another plug for the Mensch Award nominations, which are due May 3rd. I will also send another email reminder about that. We also have coming up Wednesday, June 2nd, the Sustainers event, which is going to be 4 p.m. And I think we are in the process of getting direct mail invitations out. So that's exciting. And finally, I just want to do a few quick shout outs for particular organizations. I wanted to shout out Halom House and Northern Hills Synagogue in terms of rallying the week of the deadline to secure 3 or more gifts. And hopefully with the process we've started this year, it won't come down to the last week, but nevertheless, they rallied, and it was very exciting. They got the full incentives. To Jeep and Congregation Zikron Eliezer, who both secured more than 16 COCs since January of 2020 to really rally and earn the incentives. Really impressive work there. Cincinnati Hebrew Day School, in terms of a final shout out, I don't know if their team lead Mordechai Schickman is here, but he came in. He started out last year and he said, "Josh, I want to secure 10 new LOIs," and he did it. And that at first I was maybe a little skeptical, but he really impressed me and followed through on that. And just as a community, I want to really say how impressive you all were. For Life and Legacy, compared to all 69 communities from January of, I believe it was 2020, but it wasn't including the flurry of gifts we got in February and March. We had more than 40 new gifts than any other community a part of Life and Legacy, which is really incredible. And we surpassed our community goal. We're now at 79.3% formalization rate. And I'm just very excited and honored to be part of this community. And just thank you for your energy, enthusiasm, and participation. I would give Amy an introduction, but I think in the best possible way, her reputation precedes her. And I will let you take it away, Amy.
Thank you so much. I see a lot of familiar faces. So hello and thank you for joining us. I am gonna start with a plea to please turn on your video if possible so that I can see your faces. It's a lot easier to see whether or not this conversation is resonating, or if you're like a really kind of face, then I want to see that really face too. Um, so if possible, if you're not like worried about, sitting in your pajamas, then you can eat, you can drink, you can get up and walk around. I'm not picky, but if you're comfortable turning on your video, it would help me to just get a sense of how we are relating and sharing information. So I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who may get sick of seeing big slide, just a little hint. I just realized I was talking to my brother on Zoom the other day, and he said, "Can you stop sharing your screen?" Because we were doing, I guess it wasn't the other day, it was Passover, and we had a slideshow Zoom Passover. And I said, "Don't you know you can slide the line in the middle?" To see less or more of the screen or the person, and he did not know that. So now I'm going to say it on every call, that if you want to see more of me or less of me, you can, that little line that divides the people from the screen, you can just slide it back and forth, move it back and forth, make it bigger or smaller. That's your tech tip for the day. I have nothing else for you on the tech front. Here's what we're talking about today. Legacy cultivation. And one other request, sorry, please. Thank you. Will you please mute if you're not talking? And I would love for you to unmute as often as possible, because I would love for you to talk. But if you're not talking and you would mute, I would appreciate it. Here's the 2 seconds about me and about Evolve. Evolve is sort of both new and old in that I was a co-founder of Giving Tree Associates from 2008 to 2020, and then I launched Evolve and took about 19 members of the Giving Tree team with me to Evolve in June of 2020. So we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, and we are really excited, mostly not only about celebrating our 1 year, but that we feel like the nonprofit world is coming back. And it's been really a great year and a lot of engagement and involvement. We've worked with over 300 nonprofits, mostly in fundraising, strategic planning, board and leadership development, and executive recruiting. And this is my 26th year in the field. I got my start in the Jewish community in Chicago. What we're going to talk about today, and you'll hear a little bit more about me as we chat, is really the opportunity to think about the cultivation process, to understand what donor readiness means. And what I mean by that is, when are we at the point where we're fairly comfortable and confident that it is the time to ask? So if you have one takeaway from today, what I hope it is that you have a sense of what readiness means, what readiness feels like. How do we know that we're really ready to have a meaningful conversation about a gift? And I hope that we are ready, thinking about readiness, not only to sort of slide that DOI or LOI in front of your prospect, which is a great step, but I think we all want to be moving toward a confirmation of commitment. And so how do we know when someone's ready for that maybe phase 2 conversation and the next step in the conversation about committing to a legacy gift? That's really what we're going to explore today together. And I hope that's your takeaway. You will tell me at the end if that's where we got to. I want to start with what's changed. And I am going to ask you, as I start to talk about what I think has changed, to just maybe put into the chat box. And Josh and Deb can start reviewing that and maybe calling out some responses for me. What has changed for you in terms of your ability to do this work? What are the most significant changes? And I know it sort of feels like everything has changed, and what are we not going to list? But if you think about where you were a year ago, and you think about where you are today with regard to your legacy program, I know we could comment on all different aspects of your personal and professional life. I just want to limit this to the legacy program. What are the most significant changes for you? What opportunities have come your way, and what are sort of the roadblocks that you're experiencing? What has changed? Put that in the chat. We're speaking to fewer people than we used to. We're speaking to more people than we used to. We've adapted to Zoom conversations. Like, what has changed for you? My team has been downsized. I can't even think about this right now because of everything else that's going on. What are the biggies? That's what I want you to put in the chat box. Good. What are we seeing, Josh? Any brave souls starting to
Got a few comments. One is rethinking events and engagement. Another, creatively thinking and rethinking how we engage and connect with people.
Yep.
And we have a comment on pivoting. We love that word.
Yeah.
Some leaders have leaned in more to legacy consideration, both in their lifetime and after. Missing the power and impact of face-to-face communication.
Yeah.
Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
Engagement and fundraising. No in-person food meetings. Or
Yeah. We don't go to lunch or dinner right now or whatever we were doing. Okay, so it sort of feels like everything has changed, right? I mean, the way we work has fundamentally changed in the past year. And some of this is really obvious. Concern over the economy, absolutely, even though some of the wealthiest in our communities are actually doing better than they did a year ago. We're still not trusting. We don't have trust, some of our donors, that this is a time to make a financial decision. What are the good pieces of news that you can grab from this slide? And by the way, Josh is going to share with you a PDF version of this PowerPoint. And so you will have access to all of this. You don't have to take too many notes if you don't want to. The good news for us is 79% of donors plan to maintain or increase giving over the course of the next year. And there's an increase in interest in endowed and legacy giving. I've seen articles about that everywhere. That's the great news for Create Your Jewish Legacy, is that the hesitancy that some of our donors had prior to this point about sort of, I'm interested in impacting today. And if we were sort of framing endowment and maybe legacy work as that long-term sustainability conversation, preparing for that rainy day, it felt to some donors that that was too far off, that wasn't within their thinking. Again, I've heard many times conversations with your donors around, you know what, I really want to impact today. I want to think about current giving. And I think that any concern about the fact that planning for tomorrow, sustainability, long-term thinking, planning for that rainy day, is not where nonprofits' heads should be, has almost been eliminated, because we just went through not just a rainy day, we've been through a year-long storm. And so now many of our donors who maybe didn't see the value of that long-term planning and thinking about their own legacy and why the agency endowment is so important, are seeing that some organizations that really had no long-term plans are no longer with us. And that those who are doing the kind of work that you are doing through Create a Jewish Legacy are still around. And so there's this interest in ensuring not just that your programs are strong today, but that there is a pipeline for tomorrow. That is good news for all of us. What else has changed? One of the chat box comments was that we are no longer relying on events as heavily as we did before. I agree. Almost every single one of my clients has either eliminated their event or made their event virtual. And many who thought they had to do a virtual event sat down with us. And one of the conversations we had with sort of last spring's group was around return on investment for event-based fundraising, and decided it really wasn't something that they needed, that if they really called the people who generally give big to their organization during event season and pushed the relationship development, that gift was still coming in, and maybe it was even coming in stronger than it did before. So a move toward relationship building and away from what I'm calling transactional fundraising, which is making a gift to a pledge card, making a gift to an event or a raffle or online, anything where the gift is not being made because the person was asked by another person. That is transactional fundraising. There's a place for that. There's just not a great place for that in legacy asking and giving. That much of the work that we're doing, and that sort of work generally, with some exceptions, belongs in your annual campaign category. When we're talking about legacy development, we're hoping you're not just pushing the paper and saying, take a look at this declaration of intent. Let me know what you want to do via email. We're really looking to push that relationship. And I think that COVID, if it has given us a lot of hardship, if the pandemic has given us any gifts, it is that we have been forced to really look at ourselves in the mirror and the approach that we're taking and focus on relationship building. The other big change, which again seems obvious and many of you commented on, is that we are really reliant on live video as our relationship building tool right now. And if we're not getting good at that, then we're probably not talking to donors. I don't know exactly how things are in Cincinnati with regard to the vaccination. Are you seeing that most people are getting vaccinated? Because around here, the answer is yes. Yeah, you are too. So my sense is, what I'm seeing is that some of my clients, I mean, not in California, by the way, I mean, it just sort of depends where you are geographically, but if you're in a community that has vaccination access, I'm seeing the face-to-face meetings start to come back. I still think that more people will remain virtual from home, and it will be easier going forward to get meetings with these people via Zoom than it will be in person. There's still going to be some hesitancy. I think that there will be remnants of that hesitancy for another year from now. And so being able to adapt our work to Zoom and to video conferencing, and maybe we're going to do, if in the past we might fly out to go meet with a major donor, we're going to do that, have that conversation via Zoom. It's cheaper and people are used to it now, whereas it felt like a big deal a year ago. How many of us are, maybe you could just put this in the chat, but or actually, does everyone know how to raise their hand? How many of us are actually conducting, I'm going to stop share for a second so I can see you. Raise your hand, which by the way is at the bottom of your screen in reactions, if you've never done a reaction. If you are right now conducting solicitation or cultivation conversations via Zoom. Thanks, David. So not many of us.
I'm participating but driving, and so I'm not going to react in any kind of way.
Okay. But are you now that you're talking, you could just tell us, are you doing, is your agency doing Zoom solicitation and cultivation? I don't know who that was. Does anyone recognize?
It's Tanya, and I just, it's hard for me to turn the mic on and off. So we have lots of things going on with Zoom, yes. But,
okay. So it looked like about a third of us are actually utilizing Zoom right now for, again, major gift solicitations and major gift conversations. I think that the better that we get with that, and by the way, the next session that we do together, which is I think May 20th, we're going to really talk about the ask, and I will spend some significant time talking about soliciting via Zoom. And by soliciting, I mean either asking for that letter of intent, declaration of intent, or the confirmation of commitment, or for some of you, it might be an ask for a cash endowment. But I really do want us to get better and better at utilizing this tool, because I do not think it is going away. I don't know if anyone disagrees. So that's the quick and dirty on what's changed. And I think you're living this. So you're sort of thinking, yeah, I know that. Good. So let's agree to move on. What has not changed? What has not changed are the reasons that people give. That has stayed the same. And I think what is maybe perhaps most significant for us on this call is this piece toward the bottom around the desire to leave a lasting legacy. We are talking to people about legacy gifts for whom this is a motivation, many of them. And we capitalize not in an opportunistic way, but in a really positive way on that desire by asking questions about what that means for that donor. What does that mean? What are you thinking about in terms of your legacy to this community? What do you want to pass down to your children in terms of values and engagement and involvement in this community? What's important for you? What should Cincinnati look like? Jewish Cincinnati look like after you're gone? Right? What can you help us to build? And so those are the kinds of conversations. People who are interested in a legacy conversation, generally what I have found over the years that I have been doing this, do have goals for their own philanthropy and for the community at large. And that's the conversation that we want to engage them in. That's what we want to start talking about. What else has not changed? The key qualities of a major donor prospect, of a legacy prospect. And there are sort of different versions of this ABC, but I want if there's one thing that I'd like to ask you to commit to memory from my entire slide deck, it's this slide: ability, belief, connection. That's the ABC, because I have found that I have been using this sort of little reminder maybe for 20 years of my career when I think about readiness, when I think about, is this person ready to be asked? What is stopping me from being comfortable having this conversation about a legacy gift? I generally find that if I'm not pushing myself forward, I'm not pushing a client forward, one of these is missing. So in order for you to feel confident, this, by the way, most of the hesitancy and the discomfort is about you, not the donor, not the prospect. So we have to sort of tap into what's going on here with ourselves. The discomfort that we feel around asking generally comes from one of these things not being true. Because when all three things are true, the person has the ability to make a meaningful gift. In other words, there's wealth or there will be wealth. There's something to leave us, right? It might be a hybrid gift, right? Part cash endowment, part legacy, whatever it is, but there's the ability to do it. We know that. We've done the research. They've made other big gifts in the community. There's data to support that there's the ability. Okay, check that box. B, belief in the mission. I know this person cares about my congregation. I know this person cares about Jewish student life on campus. I know this person cares deeply about Jewish education. Belief in the mission. Doesn't mean they care specifically about what I do, but they believe generally in the mission. Okay, check that box. That is verifiable. We can, again, gain that from conversations and from their activities and the work that they do and the gifts that they make in the community. C tends to be our big problem. So a lot of times I have a client that says to me, yep, A and B are true. They have the money, they can do this. They support other organizations that do what we do. But you have to have C too. A and B are not enough. So just because Amy Schiffman has the ability to make a legacy gift to your organization and supports another day school, or has done some work with another Hillel, doesn't mean that they or has made gifts to other Jewish organizations outside of our congregation, doesn't mean that I'm ready and committed to making a gift to yours. So we have to establish that C, the connection with or within our organization. That can be with a person, right? The connection might be with your rabbi, with your head of school, with your executive director, with your development director. There's got to be that either personal connection with the person or with a program. This is someone who volunteers, right? They may not have a really strong established connection with a particular individual, which really helps, by the way, with a board member or staff member, but they show up, every week. I mean, in Chicago, some of you may know the ARC. My mom shows up every week and volunteers with the ARC. She has a strong established connection with the organization, not necessarily with a staff member there, but she feels really connected to the organization. When all of those things are true, when we work to the point that all those things are true, we will, I promise you, you will feel more comfortable and even excited about the ask. If one of those things are missing, then we get nervous. And you should get nervous because we need all those things to be true to get past that. Some of you are able to achieve $1,000 declaration of commitment or intent, right? That you're partially there, but you know this person has the ability to make a more meaningful gift, maybe commit to something a little bit more significant within their estate plans. But we're not comfortable yet asking why. What is it that we need to know? What's the holdup? Why are we not asking? Either we feel unprepared for the conversation, we're nervous that they're going to want to talk about a charitable remainder trust and we have no idea what that means, and so that this is not, I'm feeling nervous because I'm not an estate planner, I need an attorney in the room. Okay, maybe some of you feel that way. I'm worried about offending them, or fear, or hinting at death, that we have to talk about end of life, a situation, and I'm just worried that they're going to take that the wrong way. Or not enough practice. I just haven't been in these conversations before. I don't know how they go, and I'm worried about the three above in addition. Is this resonating for any of you? I just want to stop the share before I respond to these, which I will. Which is, can someone come off mute and just say it's really that first or second? Or is it all of them all the time? Like what's happening for your team?
Actually, it's resonating to me, Sam Lobar from the Valley Temple, because and Josh and I spoke about this. One of the things that seemed to characterize about, I think it was 2/3, Josh was saying, of our LOIs is that they are in the $1,000 range, and so there are there are a couple of things. So I'd like to, and Josh, we didn't really go into this because we didn't have enough time. My fault. But at our next meeting, we should probably talk to our committee about what you had talked about to me, is going back to those people and seeing if we can increase the gift. But I think it's difficult. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking like these people, some of them I know pretty well, and they probably put that down because that's what they thought that they could afford, in the end, which is always, to me, it's kind of laughable because it's you're not paying anything now, so why are you worrying about what you can afford in
Right.
the end? But anyway, and so I often will try to encourage people when I'm speaking with them to put a percentage, because the likelihood is that the percentage is going to be larger, even if it's 1%. But
Right.
Josh he has chided me in saying, let's not go for the lowest common denominator, So I think it's a challenge. I don't mean to take so much of the time here, but it really resonates, because as you were talking about it, I was thinking to myself, this is a thing that we need to spend time on in our committee.
Yes.
Because meaningful, I put those three boxes that you had, I put my mind's emphasis on the word meaningful.
Yeah.
But meaningful to whom? Because
Right.
to the people who put the $1,000 on there, they felt it was meaningful for whatever reason it was. Meaningful that they could do this, meaningful that they're helping us get to the incentive for this year, meaningful that in the future, they're going to be remembered for having given something to the organization.
Yeah, I think, Sam, great points all around. A couple things I want to point out is that if someone is giving at the lowest level that they can in order to participate in the program, it may not be for some that might be a meaningful gift. For many, it's that, again, we did this and we're not ready to think about it much further. Like we're in to help you make your number. That's what I found in coaching in this program. And so going back to them to have this conversation about what feels meaningful to them, and then you'll know what they're able to do, and putting some options out there. And again, you don't have to be an expert on the technical pieces. You're just looking to explore what they're hoping for in terms of a legacy for the community. And the number one thing I want to reiterate here is that we cannot make the decision for them. We cannot decide that is the meaningful and that's the max gift when you have not asked them for an amount. You have not asked them to consider anything else. I mean, for some of them, maybe you did ask, but I'm just saying, let's say you didn't. We don't want to, we get in our own way. We make the decision that it's not a good idea or it's uncomfortable or it's unachievable for the donor. And we need to give the person the opportunity to have that conversation with us. Evelyn.
One of the things that I've been thinking about recently has to do with the mission. And well, I think it's tied in with this strategy work that Josh has us doing now around education and marketing or some of the components. And I'm thinking that while people may identify with the mission of an organization, they may not really understand the mission of legacy giving. The difference between an endowment and the mission of an endowment versus like an operating budget. So I'm thinking that there needs to be in education and marketing, an orientation also in education of people towards the mission of legacy giving. That we're very focused on, do they have, are they engaged in the organization, but we're not really explaining. We might, at least in our organization, might need to take a step backwards.
That's right. So your case, your legacy case for support, that has to be something that anyone who's going out and not just asking, but having conversations, cultivation conversations with your prospect is comfortable communicating to the people that they're talking to. And most of us have needed to rewrite that legacy case or update that legacy case since the pandemic. And I think you have an even stronger case for support now, given what we've all just been through. So if you have not yet updated that case, or you want to talk offline to me about how you do that and whether or not your case is compelling, I'm happy to have that conversation. But I agree, we need the tools in hand to be comfortable. So if let me go back here. If your team is feeling any of this, then what do we do? What do we do? We need to ensure that people, again, have the tools to feel comfortable having that conversation. And yet at the same time, we have to dispel myths because, as I say here, few people opt for technical gifts. 70% of planned gifts are simple bequests that are not complicated. That means that people are leaving a gift in their will. 70%. So we don't need the entire team to learn a lot about the different opportunities, insurance, that sort of thing. Most people are not doing that. We also have to dispel the myth that people may be offended at having this conversation. Yes, we avoid using the word death in the conversation. And we'll talk more about this. I have a slide on this in our next presentation. What language, what are the words that we use? And we can talk much more about that. But the team needs to get over themselves, right? If you have people who feel like they can't have these conversations, then they shouldn't have assignments, or they need more training. We have to get out, like I said, we have to get out of our own way. If it's not comfortable, then probably let's go back to our ABCs. We haven't done all of that homework. And if anyone's worried about legacy asking negatively impacting annual giving, it's just not true. And I can show you the stats. In fact, people who commit to a legacy gift for an organization are more likely to increase their annual gift than decrease it because they have a long-term investment in the organization. And I have stats on that if anyone's committee is worried about that. So how do we go about moving people from here, prospective donor, to legacy donor? Most of the people that you are, and the quick answer is we don't. We're not generally looking at people who are non-donors, who what I'm calling prospects to the organization. They don't go from being a non-donor to a legacy donor. They're generally coming from somewhere in between, somewhere in this major donor, committed donor, or even occasional donor category, more likely major and committed donors. So that's the place that we're looking at. We generally do an okay job of identifying our legacy prospects. Maybe you've done an okay job, and if you haven't, I'll address that on the next two slides, of coming up with that list, the likely prospects for a legacy gift. Where we don't do a great job is the cultivation process. And then once that gift is solicited, or we're looking to move from a declaration of intent to confirmation of commitment, and that takes stewardship, we're not doing a great job of moving that along. So that's where I want to spend the remainder of our hour together talking about. And I'll spend less than 2 minutes talking about prospecting for those of you who are still having a hard time coming up with that list. Like, where are the people coming from? So here's my quick and dirty sort of cheat sheet to figuring out where that list comes from. And really what we're doing is looking, if you have to look beyond the categories on this slide, I will be surprised. So I'm looking at my major donors, but I'm also looking at people who have given to me for years and years and years. So Spurtus here in Chicago, we looked at a list of people who had been giving for 25 years or more. That was the start of our legacy list. And we also wanted to look at people who never skip a year, consecutive donors. So it might be that someone is given for 6, 7 years in a row. They haven't been giving for 25, but they're committed. There's that consecutive giving. Someone with a donor advised fund generally has some longer term goals for their philanthropy, and people who are active on committees or active volunteers, they always show up at your events. Clients, service people who utilize your services. This is where we tend to look. This is what I will call the low-hanging fruit. What is it that I should know about these people? How do I get the ABC boxes checked off? I always say that you need to be able to answer about 6 of these 9 questions. If you can answer at least 6, you may be ready for the ask. If you can't, I don't blame you for feeling uncomfortable about the ask, because you probably have not spent enough time with this person or done enough research to be comfortable asking for someone to move past that declaration of intent. So these are the questions we should be able to answer. Not all of them. Maybe we don't cover all of these things, but if you're having coffee or Zoom dates somewhat regularly with your top prospects, the top 10 people on your list that you think really could make, back to that meaningful word, a meaningful gift or commitment, legacy, hybrid gift, percent of the estate, whatever it is that's right for that person. What should we know? We really should know, for our top 10 prospects, we should be able to answer 2/3 of these questions. And the way to get that answer is not tricky. Yes, some of this we can do some Google research and prospect research, but we also need to be sitting down and talking to that person and asking questions and understanding what motivates them. What are they passionate about? Why have they been members of the congregation this long? Why have they been giving to us for years and years and years? Why do they care about the work that we do? Once we have that list developed, and we start being able to answer those questions, we are going to review that list with leadership. This is the purpose of your legacy committee, is to sit down and look at that list, do as much research as we need to do, and we develop cultivation and or stewardship plans if the person's already a donor for each and every one of our top prospects. And we assign a relationship manager to those people. Who's going to ensure that the next step actually happens? Who's driving the car here, the boat, whatever vehicle you want to use? Who's in charge of moving this forward? Is it the professional? Is there a lay leader who's really doing this? Because there isn't a professional who's overseeing this. For every organization, it's going to be different. And there may be more than one person. Sometimes on my list, when I develop that cultivation and stewardship plan, I might have 3 people's names, right? The rabbi, a board member, and the director of development, whatever it looks like. But who's moving it forward? Who's paying attention to the next thing that needs to happen in order to get to that place where we are comfortable asking? That's the question. Deb, I don't know who you're with in this picture, but it's a good picture of you.
Hey, we have to do a shout out. That's Reagan and that's Winnie.
Oh, Reagan. Yes.
And Winnie Grinspoon from the Grinspoon
Oh,
Foundation.
Winnie.
That's when we got our recognition for completing Life and Legacy's 4-year program. So, yay.
Reagan, I didn't recognize you, but now, and I know Winnie, so it's funny. It wasn't in like context for me. The secret here, right? The secret is not a secret. It's that we have to work to match the work that you're doing to the donor's interests and passions. That is the secret. We have to figure out, where is that connection? Where is that crossover? What do they love? What do they care about? What do they want to make happen in the community even after they're gone? And what do? You do that thing. You can make that happen. We can partner and actually help you achieve your philanthropic goals. That's exciting. That's a win. That's a conversation I want to be in the room for. That's fun. That's why I'm a fundraiser. I love doing that. I love being able to match someone's philanthropic goals and passions with the work that one of my clients is doing. Let's change the world together. You can help us do that financially. We have the staff, the team, the expertise, the board that can make it happen. Awesome. That's the conversation we should be looking forward to having. Not this $1,000 is their max. Like, it's not about the number. It is not about the by the way, the declaration of intent. That's just the foot in the door. Let's have the conversation about the change that this person wants to see and how their legacy gift can actually make them a partner in making that happen in our community. That is cool. That's the conversation that we need to be focused on. So if your committee is getting caught up in the, I don't know how to talk about this, I don't understand the tech, I'm just here to tell you, I've been doing this a long time. I've been training in National Endowment and Legacy programs for years. I couldn't explain those things either. I just talk about major gifts because that's what this is. This is about relationship development. Right? And again, where I want you to spend the most time and energy thinking is about that cultivation process. Solicitation, like, we'll get to the ask. Right? That part, like I said, if we line all the pieces up, if we understand A, B, and C are true, and we can answer 6 of those 9 questions, the actual ask part is the easy part. And we're going to go through that next time. So I'm not going to talk about that today. But the cultivation part is not easy. It takes time and energy, and it has to have a driver. There has to be someone saying what's next. As a prior director of development, that was me. I was saying to my head of school at Ida Crown here in Chicago, right? You're supposed to be reaching out to this person for coffee. You need to call them and say happy birthday. You need to sit down with them and talk to them about our legacy case for support, right? Hey, board chair, this is what's next for you. Here's this plan. There has to be a driver, someone who is actually helping us move through the moves. And so what I want to suggest right now, I'm going to show you a couple of slides on what those moves might look like, what that plan might look like. And then I want you to spend a couple of minutes, even while I'm talking. So I'll tell you in advance what I'm going to ask you to do in terms of just a quick exercise. I want you to think about the top prospect, the lowest hanging fruit on your list, the person who probably, if we get in front, they're ready. The 3 boxes checked. Ability, belief, connection. We know that's true. They've been sitting on our list for a long time. They may have their DOI. I can't remember. Are you guys DOI or LOI? D.
LOI.
Huh?
LOI.
L.
Yeah.
Letter of intent. Okay. LOI is in. We know that there's probably more than that $1,000 minimum commitment there. We need to go have that conversation. We're not feeling like we can just pick up and do it because they haven't heard from us in a while. What needs to happen between now and the time that you actually ask them to move on to a confirmation of commitment? What are the steps? We're not talking about the ask, the solicitation. What needs to happen between now and then? That's what we're talking. That is cultivation. So are there things that you are going to email this person? Are you constantly, is there, and again, I don't think that you can do this for 100 people, by the way. Most of us can't. Maybe the Federation folks can because they have bigger teams. Well, they might even be laughing at me. Okay, they can't either. We can't do this for 100 people. I want you to think about, what can you do? What can you commit to? Are there 8 or 10 people on the list that you and your committee can commit to creating a personalized cultivation plan, putting it on paper or on a screen, typing it out? Here's what's going to happen over the next 6 months. Here's how many times they're going to hear from us. These don't all have to be coffees or like backyard meetings, by the way, or by then maybe we'll be in people's houses and having conversations, or offices. One of the moves might be, here's a picture from our safe, socially distanced picnic that's happening in May. Like, I want you to send video. I want you to send photos. I want you to send interesting articles from your newsletter, even if they're already getting the newsletter, with a personal note from you. These are not all high touch, labor intensive, expensive opportunities. Some of this is light touch. There's nothing we can't email these days, right? I can send someone a book if I want to. So what is it how are they going to hear from you? And this chart moves from sort of that light touch spectrum to a heavier personal touch in terms of experiencing and inviting them. So who do they need to meet with? What is it? How are they going to hear from you? If there is no plan, if you can't do this, I'd be happy if you did this for 5 people on your list. And by the way, that's going to be the homework assignment between this session and May 20th, is that I'm going to ask Josh to collect at least one plan from each of you, a cultivation plan for a top prospect. And if you still don't know what I'm talking about, if you actually want me to send you a template to do it, like a sample, how about we just do that for everybody, Josh? They get a sample from me instead of just asking for it. I'm going to give you a sample plan, and you can change it. You can make it Excel. I don't care what format it is. But if you can start working on that right now, what will it look like to get to the ask? What needs to happen for your top 1 or 2 or 3 people? Who do they need to meet? What do they need to see? What do they need to know? Is there anything you can invite them to? Are you doing anything this summer, again, that is safe and comfortable for them? Here's another way of looking. The difference in the way I talk about cultivation and stewardship. Cultivation is a term I use for moving a prospect from awareness to commitment. In other words, a non, in your case, legacy donor into a committed legacy donor. Stewardship is generally what we do after they've given to keep them, right? Especially if there's a legacy commitment and you need to stay in the will for the next 20 years. What are you going to do to stay there? How are you going to maintain a presence in this person's life for years and years to come? That's stewardship. It's as important as cultivation. So I want you to think about not only your cultivation strategy, but how are we staying in people's lives? We do that with our annual campaign donors too, because we want them to give year after year. We don't want them to only hear from us when it is time to ask them for money. So what does that plan look like? I'm suggesting, normally I have 4 markets. I pared this down for you to 2, that you think about sort of what does everybody get? And then what are our major donor and legacy prospects get? Donor recognition, maybe naming opportunities for some types of endowment gifts, leadership development opportunities, training, personal visits when we can, and customized cultivation plan, which is what I'm talking about. That means each person gets their own. For those, and I mentioned we can't do this for everyone. So and again, these numbers are a bit higher because they're meant for legacy and endowment giving and not necessarily annual giving, but you should have some form of this stewardship calendar. In other words, like how does my team, how does my board, how does my committee know who gets what? This is something that you can easily customize for you. What are you planning to do for people at different giving levels? Do all legacy donors get, or committed legacy donors get the same thing? Fine, but what is that thing? Or what are those things? What are those moves? So I'm asking you to think about a cultivation calendar by individual, and then also some kind of a stewardship calendar for your top donors, but also one that is by giving level. What happens? is there a point at which people get included in your legacy plaque or something that goes on the wall? Is everybody invited to your brunch in the fall? Whatever it is, that should be planned out.
This gets back to someone pulling,
Someone needs to mute.
this gets back to stay above.
And part of that cultivation and that stewardship opportunity is about engagement. Josh, can you tell who that is?
Kayla on the Zoom call. Is everything all right?
Marlene,
All right,
can you mute yourself? I don't think I have the ability to mute her.
I don't either. I'm trying to
Oh,
figure out.
this
what I
afternoon,
can
okay?
do. Marlene, can you
Good to
mute?
hear from you. Bye.
Okay. One of the things I want you to keep in mind, and is probably pretty obvious, but maybe not for everyone, is that what we find, this is the Tarnside Curve, and this has been around for years and years and years, and I actually use this in the class that I teach on fundraising for graduate students at HUC, is that with increased involvement comes increased commitment. And if this, again, for many of us, this might be somewhat obvious, but I think it's important for your committees and your boards to see that the more that we can engage, that cultivation and that stewardship really makes a difference, especially if we're moving into sort of that next generation of donors that is very interested in following their dollar. They are, we always hear about millennials being interested in volunteer opportunities and restricted or really identified giving opportunities. We want to know where those dollars are going, and we like that hands-on experience. I think that's true for every generation now, by the way, is that if we can sort of get involved and be engaged in some kind of volunteer opportunity or opportunity to see the program in action, our giving is going to go up. So if you can think with your legacy committee about how we make this work more tangible for our donors, how we give them an opportunity to see our work in action. I mean, if you're a congregation, right, this is what you're living day to day. There's always an opportunity to see this in action, especially once your buildings open up again. But sometimes people need special invitations to come to things they don't normally come to. Might be available to everyone, but it might be a special opportunity to show someone a program or a project from a different perspective, or ask them to volunteer or lend a hand. Because once we're engaged, once we sit on the committee or the board, we get it. And again, the dollars tend to follow. So I know we only have a couple minutes left. What I'd like to ask us to do, again, in the chat box, and then I'm going to use the last couple of minutes for questions, is to think about your P, your I, or your E, PI, pearl of information learned, item to implement, or encouragement I receive. So if you can pick one and share with us in the chat box, is there something that you learned? Is there something that you feel like you're going to do? I did, however, give you an assignment that I would like to be able to reflect on for the next time we talk, which is May 20th. And we're going to be talking about making the ask. And let me reiterate, and we'll do it in email too for people who weren't here. What we're asking you to do between this session and next session is pick one prospect. You might want to do 2 or 3, and that's fine, but at least one prospect, and develop that customized, individualized cultivation plan for that person, for that prospect. What will it take to move them to the next level in terms of legacy engagement? It might be a letter of intent, and it might be confirmation of commitment. What will it take to move them to that next stage in the conversation? What does that plan look like? So a step-by-step plan, and we'll send you a sample so that you're able to do that. Aside from that, is there anything else? And I'm going to open my chat box too, that you learned, you have the thought that you will implement, or you feel encouraged in some way. And just to make sure that on your calendars, we've got May 20th and June 10th. Closing the gift, and that'll be our final session in the series. And if you need to ask me anything in between now and then, my email is amy@evolvegg.com, and we'll make sure that you have that contact information in the email as well.
Amy, I love this, and I love the simplicity of the conversation for cultivation, because that's such, I think we feel like that first conversation needs to be, let's go in and get the LOI, but to be able to really get to know your donor and ask those, 9 questions will not only give you an opportunity to really understand their commitment to your organization, but also the commitment to the community, and might lead to a multiple gift for multiple organizations. And so it's, and I think just taking that step back and hearing that it's that cultivation piece that we often skip over that is so important and should resonate with all of us. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. And someone commented as a takeaway, the ABC key qualities. Any questions anyone has, or any thoughts you want to share with the group, struggles that you're having, things that sort of didn't feel like they rang true for you? Okay, well, if not, I will bid you farewell. I will encourage you to start working with your committee on these plans.